remember that correctly. Is that
It
right?
it's been about 10 months.
Yeah, I know almost a whole year since we
Yeah.
first met each other, right?
You traveled the world because I'm following you, so I know.
I'm still traveling actually. I'm still traveling. I'll be going to Australia and New Zealand in about a
Wow.
month or two. So, have
That's a
you done
huge
any
that
travels
that
yourself?
I'm really at home. I'm working
Comfortable at home.
or I'm cooking for my family or I'm
Mhm.
out walking or working out. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
that's
it. I
great.
let all of you take care of the travel.
That's a
You
great
post it on social yeah, you post it on social media. I follow you. I feel like you're going to Australia and New Zealand, and I follow along and feel like I'm going. What are you going for?
I'm going for about 3 weeks. So I'm going at the end of September and going to sort of mid October. I want to visit a couple of clinics in Australia as well, because from what I understand, even some of the products that they have in Australia, they have it a little bit even earlier than US and Canada. A lot of the
Yeah.
products that trickle in from South Korea, Philippines, Asia tend to go more towards Australia before going towards the States and Canada. So I like to always keep in the loop on the new things in medical aesthetics. And I'm sure on your side, you might be still working on everything business development for clinics as well. I'm guessing.
Well, huge. Summer is a busy time here at Results Continuum because
Mm,
we're doing a ton of Q4 planning for our
yeah.
clients.
Oh, for
And
sure.
Q4 gained a month in case you didn't get the memo. It's no longer October to December. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
September to December, it seems. And
Yeah.
it's important because it's not only important just to maintain sanity because it's busy season. Q4 is busy season in all wellness, never
Yeah.
mind medical aesthetics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's also planting the seeds for Q1.
Mm, right.
So
Or next
yeah,
year,
it's a
right?
really busy time.
Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. I think
Um,
as business owner, because I'm when I first met you, LD, I just became a brand new business owner at the time. I don't know if you remember that.
of course I do.
And one of the first questions, and actually that's one of the things that sort of drew my attention towards you, was the your approach on how one would manage a clinic besides just operations. And I remember from your presentation that it kind of comes from the top down. If you're the leader of your team, if you're the CEO, and if you're the manager, you need to it's your responsibility to make sure that your operations run correctly as well. And it came a lot from self development. So I have been doing quite a bit of self development over the last year. But although, as a business owner, if you're
Yeah.
year one in your business, you're going to learn so much on how to run a business. And because you're wearing multiple hats and running around left and right, doing everything all together. So I learned that firsthand. But it would also be interesting today to pick your brain a little bit on what are some things that some clinics are doing well. What are the some challenges that you see in 2024 or even Q1 of 2025? Because the world of medical aesthetics, it moves extremely fast, as you know. In the last couple of years, you see clinics open, you see clinics close, even some that do very well, some that don't do as much. So you've seen it all, right, Ilda? You've been in the field for many years, and I would like to ask you a bunch of questions on it. So we're going to jump right into the episode. So this is called Beauty Banter, and we're going to be talking to Ildi Arlette today about all things business development, but at the same time, how business operations and development can not only improve patient satisfaction, but also patients' outcomes at the clinic, because that's the real goal at the end of the day, is making patients not only look good, but also feel good, and continuing medical aesthetics in the right direction. So let's welcome Ildi Arlette. Ildi, welcome, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Alex, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Ildi, I actually met you at a conference, a dinner conference, actually, almost about over a year ago. What have you been doing since then, Ildi? What have you been doing in your developments? I know you've been very busy.
Well, I'm headed into my 23rd year as a business consultant for medical aesthetics and in the last 5 years, wellness clinics outside of aesthetics. And there is no slowdown. I'm happy to report it's been year over year growth and
Mm,
activities here. It's been amazing. And the last year, I've been spending serving my clients. I work with private clients. We have a group program that is a blend of a leadership and a business development
mm,
program. And frankly, I've been pouring myself into all of that.
mm.
I don't actually do a lot of presentations, although I'm happy to be invited. But some years ago, I couldn't keep up with the number one, the invitations, only because there were so many new events starting. I don't know if you're seeing it too, but people's algorithm is every
Yeah.
other conference and every other meeting, and it's become an entire industry, which
Hmm.
I have a lot of opinions about after 20 plus years.
For
So,
sure.
but interestingly, even though, we're supporting our clients doing business development, supporting them as leaders, business owners, this year has been different for, I think, in two ways. One, you talked about the field moving very quickly. Business is also moving quickly. And I see those two things as like two parallel lines.
Mm.
Yeah, I turn around and there's like a new product and a new filler and a new technique and a
All the time.
new,
All the
like,
time.
I cannot even keep up, and actually try really hard not to keep up on that end. But on the business end, things have sped up as well. My favorite example this time of year, which started a few years ago, is we're recording this in summer months in August, and there's, pumpkins at Costco and Canadian Tire and Sam's Club. I mean, what's happening? So things are speeding up. And I actually noticed that trend around 2014,
Mm,
where December used to be financially the most profitable month for my medical aesthetic clinics,
mhm.
hands down. And then it started to shift to November and it stayed there. And I think because in business, we're watching consumer behavior. And I love, Alex, how you intersected and intertwined or recognized how intertwined um, running your clinic and business and knowing how to do that as a business person and leader and patient satisfaction outcomes, because those two things are peanut butter and jelly. They go together.
Absolutely.
So I'm noticing that consumer behavior, there's Black Friday promotions pretty much in October.
Mm,
Things are just happening earlier. And I think the pressure, perceived pressure, and actual pressure for a business owner, for a clinic owner to say, wow, should we be already thinking about that? Like you and I talked about right now, helping clients plan out their Q4,
mhm.
which Q4 is now September to December. We've officially added a month. And for us, we're trying to take some pressure off clients because, there's certainly a personality type that goes into this field that I think after 20 to 23 years, I've seen a trend in behavior for how that person runs their business or how they think they should versus what they actually should be doing.
Mm,
So I think things are moving faster. So we're needing to keep up with our curriculum, with our teachings. And I really feel like I haven't talked about this actually outside our own team, but I feel like there's two things happening. We're not only now supporting the clinic founder and their teams in operating the business, but we're doing a whole lot of work to try and keep them boundaried so that y'all don't feel like you have to be doing everything all the time, 24-hour running, thinking of the business. I have no life, no time for my relationships,
yeah. Yeah.
and doing a lot of managing of that. The
Mm,
second part that's been different for this year, and I have not seen this to this level in my entire career. So we've always supported the clinic founder and their team. Team is crucial
yeah.
in your business success and your patient outcomes, period. Alex, I have never had this volume or intensity of staff issues with people's teams ever. Like it has
I can
always been the
relate to that.
primary
I can
ever
relate
in
to
my
that.
entire career.
Yeah.
And it has been a primary function of what we do. My clients literally call it the bat line. They will SOS text me and say, Ildi, something's happened with a team member, or I'm at the end of my rope, or whatever it is. And the intensity and the topic and volume of these incidents, they are really bringing some of my most solid people and established clinic owners like to their knees,
Oh,
like
wow.
screaming for mercy, saying, wow,
Wow.
I actually feel like I can't run my business. And then worse, I don't feel like I want to run my business. Can you just help me get rid of it?
Wow, to that extent. To that
Oh, yes.
extent. My goodness. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's that's one thing that I noticed, especially when I became a first business owner, was, if I was in the medical field before, so I'm sort of like the master of all things medical, injectables,
Mhm.
consultation, the medical side of it. And once you get into a little bit more of the management side, well, you open up a whole world of it's a completely different world when I first became a business owner, to be honest with you. And because you're trying to cut costs, because you're trying to learn at the same time, you tend to wear multiple hats at the beginning. And I think a lot of business owners are going to wear their hats, a lot of these hats, because they want to not only learn, but they feel like, if they can do it themselves, well, why would they let somebody else do it? Um, as I go along with that, the problem with that is that at some point there's only 24 hours in the day, and you realize that, oh well, there's a whole profession that's meant for that field. So I'll give you an example, like marketing. There is a bunch of companies that are focusing on social media marketing, and even now targeting specifically med spas and medical aesthetic
Yeah.
clinics. There are even, SEO companies and, Google ads where they will be targeting med spa companies in particular. So the field has become very, very, I would say almost in the field of the medical field, very specialized as well, because they're targeting, I think a lot of the marketers are also targeting these med spas at the same time. And these owners, like as new owners, such as myself,
Mhm.
there's no guide, there's no right path to go along. You try and absorb as much information as possible and make the sort of best decision at that moment, but you don't know, and you don't have any hindsight on if that's a good decision or not. And I think the biggest difficulty for me was not necessarily having a mentor that went through it and
Yeah.
lived through a lot of these sort of things. So, and me as an individual, I'm quite an independent person, so I always try and do things on my own. But I do
Yeah.
see the benefit now of having a mentor who's able to not only give you the advice, but try and avoid heavy, costly mistakes in your business, because there are some, and they might seem like the smallest detail, but it ends up becoming the biggest issue in a clinic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That sentiment, Alex, really describes perfectly what a lot of people experience in
Mhm.
their first year. Here's the surprising thing.
Yeah.
If I look at the clients who we serve, they say exactly what you're saying. I wish there was a guide.
Yep.
I don't have a coach or mentor.
Yep.
I'm looking around trying to understand what to do. And I'd love to learn from people who walked before me. But
Mhm.
when you look at, for example, our business and leadership program, the average clinic is 10 years plus. And I have many that are in their 16th year who are saying
Amazing.
exactly the same thing, word for word, that you just said.
Really, really,
Yeah,
even after 10 years, my goodness.
10
I'm glad
years,
that I'm not
16
the only
years,
one.
18 years.
Oh
And
my
you think,
goodness.
wow, but how could that be? Don't you want to get it right? Don't you want to figure it out?
Mhm.
They have been. They
Mhm.
have been. So I think there's something about all of you medical professionals that are attracted to medical aesthetics. Like you're seeing it too. So many people, right or
Mhm.
wrong, that's a whole other webinar,
Mhm.
podcast, people leaving
That's
medical
a
careers.
lovely topic, to be very honest with you. We can that should be in one of the
Yeah.
next upcoming
Yeah.
episodes. Yeah.
I get those calls now several times a month to say, Ildi,
Mhm.
would you speak to one of my colleagues
Mhm.
um, on or off the record because he or she wants to go into medical aesthetics? They're a radiologist, they're an OBGYN, they are a GP, whatever. But what's interesting is we used to see the GPs coming in a lot, and now I'm seeing people leaving specialties and wanting to come over to medical aesthetics. So, talk about runway. I have 2 decades to look back on and to be observing. And I think that that's why when you ask me, have you traveled this, that? No, I'm generally working. I do really love my work. I love the process of business. I love supporting the leader. So no, I'm here. And so I'm really watching. I'm watching what's happening. Um, not so much on consumer trend, but consumer behavior. But I'm very closely watching what's happening in the medical landscape. And so people are leaving and coming into medical aesthetics. What I have noticed is it brings a certain type of person who says, move over, I'll do it myself, times 20 years. It brings a perfectionist. I like things done right mentality, and you have a right way to do things. And if you're not going to do it the right way, move over because I'll show you.
Mhm.
P.S. We know now that perfectionism is a trauma response for most of us.
Mhm.
I noticed that there is this two-sided coin personality trait of what I call escalating standards, which is I did this. Okay, now what's next? Okay, I did it. Now what's next? Now what's next? So picture like a staircase. And so I often ask clients, like, how much is enough? Because some clients come to us and they are on the outside super successful. I've had the great privilege for 23 years to be allowed to pull back that curtain, look at the individual, look at the business, look at some of the finances. And it is really actually an honor still after all these years for someone to say, I've never talked about this, I've never shown anyone these types of numbers. But I think our process allows for that in a really safe way where people kind of, they have control of the button. They can, accelerate or they can stop as much as they want. But it attracts this personality type with these escalating standards, high achievers. They also are hugely creative,
Mhm.
like art,
Mhm.
food, drinks, like just what can I do?
Mhm.
And I don't have any data to prove it, Alex, but I also think that there's a thread of ADHD happening in here. On other days, I talk about it differently. Today, I'm in public, so I'm going to talk about it politely, and I'm going to call it an overfunctioning individual.
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but I was raised by two overfunctioning parents, immigrants who gave up things to come here and make a better life for my brother and I. That story.
Of course,
And
yeah,
they did.
and that's a story that we hear quite a lot, to be quite honest with you. And I think it might come from, you might think it comes from us, but it might come from our parents. And
Uh, but
and I always
I'll
say,
just I'll just fast track you to the end. It 100% is. So
uh,
when I say to my clients,
yeah,
and we explore, I know mindset is a very cliched word, but we do focus and unpack along the way some what I call beliefs.
mm,
Some are limiting beliefs, some are growth based beliefs.
yeah,
And it is, very true that we are in our own way. When I started in business in the 90s, which I did leadership and team development, business development consulting before I did medical aesthetics, I really identified two things that were in the way. One was leadership issues. So that means me and my business and you and your business, we are literally the biggest bottleneck. We are the biggest saboteur.
mm,
We are the biggest issue and problem. Now, we are also the biggest catalyst, is the other side of it. So why aren't we allowing things to happen? Why are we in the way? The second one was team dynamics. So not how people like each other at work and get along, but literally how they function. And then many years later, some years later actually, I started to see a correlation between team function and systems. So that's really what we're doing, is we're helping clinics set up systems
mm,
that better align with your systems, align with you, another person's systems align with who they are, because you absolutely don't want to do it anybody else's way. You're creative, so you want to put your stamp on it. That was the whole point of opening a clinic,
mhm,
or leaving one medical environment and creating another.
yeah,
So when we talk about, over functioning and, limiting beliefs, we just, in context, I ask my clients, if you believed or it were true that your upbringing or your parents are running this clinic, how would that statement fit?
mm.
And I
It
could
resonates.
see,
It resonates quite a bit with me, to be quite honest with you, and I'm sure it resonates with quite a lot of other business owners who have immigrant parents who have that sort of, like, as you say, that ADHD in them. or
Overfunctioning
that you
for
would say
sure.
highly functional. Yeah, exactly. So
Absolutely. Or another question, Alex, because like your body language, your facial expression gave you away, is you could resonate before I even finish the question
yeah.
is, um, who are you trying to prove something to? Who from your past are you trying to prove something to? Well,
Mm,
maybe Mr. Ellman, my grade 6 teacher, told me I wasn't great at math.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
as a business owner, I'm going to show up and say, "Oh, I can't do numbers. I don't like the numbers, etc." You just don't have that privilege as a business owner.
Mm,
No one does. That's not entrepreneurship. And we work hard to offer alternative beliefs, alternative ways to thinking so that a space can open up to actually know some of your numbers. So, no, you don't need to know all your numbers. However, I have a belief that 100% of my clients know basic arithmetic. I'm talking addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and that they have, I still call it a calculator, but I know it's our phones.
yeah.
But if you had to go to Staples and buy a calculator, you get one if you absolutely had to. And so we're helping fast track. And there's so many ways, I mean, literally free on the internet that a business owner can find around knowing numbers. What business does, though, is it overcomplicates things and says, Alex, do you know your revenue per square foot, a revenue per room? And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know that. I'm going to now dedicate my life to taking a break from learning about fillers to understanding room revenue. And
Mm,
I'm out here saying, if you never know that number and you're till the end of your career, like never in your life, you will be absolutely fine because there's a lot more relevant numbers based
mhm,
on what you want to achieve. But unfortunately, the other characteristic that I see, which seems obvious, but it's really the implication is by the fact that medical professionals are drawn to this profession, by the fact that you're a doctor, like you and I are actually a great example. I, in my career and profession as an entrepreneur, I'm on an elevator. So I can go to different floors. I can decide to scale my business up, scale my business down. I can decide. I don't even have to go from floor 1 to 2 to 3 to, I can go from 1 to 7 and back to 3. But I find my professional clients, and I used to work with lawyers in the past, certainly doctors, engineers, you're on an escalator. And
mm.
it, like, because what are you going to do? Entirely change careers after 17 years of school?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very unlikely. It has happened, but very, very unlikely.
Likely. Yeah.
So a lot of boredom sets in, which is a very controversial opinion in our industry, but I don't think there's an epidemic of saturation in our market. I think there's a massive epidemic in authenticity and boredom.
Mm,
And I know that nobody makes reels and funny things with their teams at the office about that, but I'm telling you, working with the number of clinics that I do in US, Canada, it is a real challenge.
mm,
And where do you go? Where do you go and where do you take this? And that's led to kind of the other problem, which is shiny object syndrome.
mm.
I'll go and learn the next thing, the next thing, the next thing in the hopes that it will improve. And maybe that's where your mentor provided some guidance to say, I remember thinking that. Here's what I did.
Mm. I think having that mentor not only allows you to bounce off on their ideas and their experiences, but
Yeah.
allows you to think on your own 2 feet and just have sort of like a second opinion as well, which may be a little bit subjective, but at least you have that other opinion that's already gone through it. One of the big things that, at least what I learned when I was growing up, was if somebody has already gone through it, the best person to ask is probably the person that just went through it, to be quite honest with you, because they literally just had that experience. You've mentioned a couple of things just now that you've identified as a couple of new problems that you see over the last year in 2024, and one of those problems you said was employees. What would you say are the biggest struggles that business owners have regarding their employees, that even after 10 years, that you were saying 12 years, 14 years, 16 years, they're still struggling with some of their employees? And that expression that you even said, it kind of like marked me, like bringing them to their knees. I'm just like, well, after 10 years, I really hope that I have systems in place that I won't fall on my knees at that point because of
Yeah,
employee issues. So could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by having those employees causing issues?
sure. Uh, you said, well, I hope to have the systems in place, and I love it. I do want to say, in the words of Anderson Cooper, hope is not a plan. So plan to put systems in place.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
So let's say you have those systems and you've worked them out, because systems is this wonderful tangible thing, and annoyingly it is ever evolving. It is not static.
Mm.
Meaning the system of how you do patient communications will change, sometimes year to year, sometimes every 3 years, as you evolve and change your brand, the consumer, the business, the market, etc. Challenge is, what if you have those systems in place and you're continually inviting people in who don't want to follow those systems, or who say they do, but when they arrive, they don't do the work?
Mm.
So if I had to summarize over 20 years, the number one biggest complaint, there is a challenge around hiring, which we can talk about. It is the most boring, unsexy topic, like in the business world, around hiring. We specialize in it because our clients sometimes hire us to help them hire, but we do have hiring support. But hiring, and the skill, all I'll say about it is, it's a build it before you need it. Okay. It's like networking, build it before you need it. You always say, well, I'll get to it. I don't need to learn about hiring now. I'll learn about hiring when I need to hire someone. That makes total sense. Like, you're busy, you're in all directions. That can wait, except that 0% of your team members will be retiring with you. 0%. 0% of, well, maybe 0.2%
Yeah.
of your listeners of our field, the people that work there now, will be retiring in the business with them. And I have literally like traveled the continent and asked now thousands of people, with the clinic owner's permission, when we do staff sessions, is, how many of you plan to retire in your current job? We ask the staff at the clinic, how many of you plan to retire in this job?
Close to zero. Close to zero. That's for
And
sure.
they like look around. Of course, we have Nancy, who's the practice manager, who's been there forever. And, she's 55 and she'll be with us till the end. Like, we have
She'll
that.
be the one. She'll be the one for sure.
Right. We might have like Kaylee, who is, 24 and a new nurse and has just fallen in love and thinks y'all walk on water and do all these things.
Mhm.
So that means that skill needs to happen. And it's not actually the skill of hiring, although there's definitely some shortcuts and ways to statistically improve who you invite into your business. But it is, again, Alex, the thinking. There is so much hiring trauma when someone leaves your business and you need to replace them. I cannot, and I'm choosing a capital T trauma today.
Yeah.
My clients have major trauma from their team. So here you have these people. So you continually, even after 10 years, may be at risk of hiring the wrong person. And
That's
so wrong person doesn't mean you're bad or incompetent and they're bad and incompetent or dishonest. However, somewhere y'all just have not done the work, or may have not had the invitation to do the work, to explore, what is a team member to you? Are you hiring? You use the language employee, which there's nothing wrong with. It's technical. But notice the difference in language when you say to a patient, I love my employees, versus I love our team.
Mhm.
So I always say, in terms of good, better, best, it's employee, staff, team.
Mhm.
We have the greatest employees here, or we have the greatest team here, sound totally different. One of my employees will help you with that, versus one of our team or team members will help you with that.
Mm.
It's a whole other vibe,
I
right?
love that. I love that because just a change in just simply in terms of vocabulary in this case, but it's not only as simple as a vocabulary. It's more how you position yourself as a team member at that point, or where do you
Well,
position yourself as an individual part of a team? And that's why you mention team member, because you want everybody included as a team member versus having sort of like that almost a top down approach, as in like that a very hierarchy, just
yes.
like in the medical field, which it was very strict back in the day when it comes to hierarchy. But in terms of patient satisfaction and how you run your business and how things work together, it's a
Yeah.
game changer, to be honest with you.
For sure. And you said, "Oh, I love that." And so even for you, when I ask you, what do you love about that? What do you love about the sound or feeling it gives you or the message for your brand when we say team versus employee? What do you love about it?
I love the fact that everybody's included into it and that
Right.
everybody's sort of at the same playing field. Is that my role is not necessarily more important than my colleague's role. We all have a role to play in this system and in this clinic, essentially.
That's right. And
And
one thing
it
in your
allows that respect
answer,
as well.
yeah, one thing in your answer, Alex, I noticed is you said in the system, and the system you came from is your family parental system,
Mm,
our culture
mm,
system, our schooling system, and your medical school system. And the last one that you touched there was medical school. And it is hierarchical.
yeah.
And it is literally, as you've mentioned a couple of times, so key. It is the only model that you and many physicians have. So I find there to be a big extreme between there's the hierarchy, I'm in charge, you will do what I ask or say, to, well, we're all equal. Well,
Yeah.
what I noticed in your answer when I asked you, why do you love that? The message, the vibe, the feeling, the concept of team versus employee, you said because then everyone has a place. And so I'm wondering what about that is important to you?
Well, I think when you're working as a team, and especially when there are a lot of tasks to be done in that day, just because there's more important tasks or less important tasks, it doesn't mean that these tasks don't need to get done regardless of it. So from the person who's taking out the trash to the person who's injecting, the roles are relatively about the same. They're all part of the functionality of the clinic. And or at least for me personally, I prefer that everybody's sort of on the same playing field when we're working all together, that nobody is sort of superior to the other. Although there's still a direction in the clinic, don't get me wrong.
There's a
There, there,
structure.
there, there still needs to have some type of structure.
Yeah.
But I never want to have any of my team members feel sort of less wanted, either because their salary is less than the others, because I know they're necessarily going to be talking to each other. Everybody has a important role at the clinic, regardless of that responsibility gets distributed. But that's my way of running things. Maybe other business owners have different way of doing it, but I think in
Right.
terms of team to retain your team, I think that's probably the better way
For
of doing
sure. And Alex, in your response, and thank you for sharing that, that is a really important question. And we use a process of questioning, it's the coaching process to
it.
get these answers, because what it does is it begins to articulate, as you said, your individual values, which feels like a really soft word, but those values inform your structure and
Mm,
running your business on your terms.
yeah.
So if we were to continue, but I don't want to turn this into like, here's Alex's
No,
live
not at all. Not at all.
business
It's a
coaching
good
session.
example though. It's a good example though. It's great.
Yeah, is I think belonging is important to you. And
Hmm.
from your answer, I heard alignment is important to you,
Hmm.
structure is important, inclusion, and roles.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
So
now that you've broken it down, I can sort of see how somebody else's upbringing can affect the way they manage their practice.
100%. And even in your answer and listening to you, Alex, with a trained ear, I heard you say things that actually something many of my clients identify with or say, which is, I want in my practice to have everybody feel like they belong and no one to feel like they don't have a place or they're somehow left out. And then you went on to talk about the efficiency of why it's important to have that structure, but into when we hear ourselves think or talk about messages like being left out, really important question to ask ourselves, because we teach all our clients self-coaching, because you should be able to, it's a skill that is learnable,
Yeah.
and you could find a lot of answers if you can discipline the mind to go through a series of really short questions. It's really even not that deep. What we're here for is if you get stuck on the answer, like I noticed I got stuck, is when you said, for everyone to have a place so nobody's left out, we ask our clients, is being left out a theme from your profession or your life? And I can
Mm,
tell you that my clients have solid, quick, and clear answers about that.
mm,
Whether it's because of their gender, whether it's because of their culture, whether it's because of what I call their medical rank, whether it is a family legacy, it comes along. So, how do we get to why are physicians calling me in tears or near tears on the SOS bat line about their staff? Because when we don't take care and explore of, we're going to go Brene Brown for a minute, that I'm going to call it wound, that agitation, that unawareness, it's a huge risk because it shows up in your everyday behavior as a physician, as a medical peer, as a business owner, as your patient's doctor, as your team leader, or even a member of your team. So when you go to make those systems or processes or decide even how to reward your team or how you want to structure the team and what roles are, if we're not aware of something that is actually so prevalent, it's running our lives, it's informing our decisions unconsciously. So in our process, it's why we focus on self-awareness first and throughout the process, right? And I'm not talking like sit in a circle, kumbaya. I'm talking the definition we use is self-awareness is noticing, monitoring, and regulating how you think, act, and feel. And what I notice in this fast moving, burnout laden, I'm responsible for everything. I have to do everything myself if I want to do it right mentality in our field. People are thinking, well, how does this office need to run? And what do roles need to look like? And how do I reward my team or let them know that I'm not happy and not going to reward? Is those beliefs in that system or fear of being left out will be overcompensated for. And they 100% of the time, for 100% of the clinic owners, show up in 100% of the processes and systems. Because believe it or not, you have a system and you also have a clinic culture. And so what I say to people when sometimes you'll refer a colleague and say, Ildi, this person's really in trouble. They're having a massive staff issue and they need to talk with someone and they need some advice. I'll ask a lot of questions. And when I say, tell me about the culture at your clinic, they won't answer that question because they just simply don't know how. And I just want to be the source of permission to say, you're not supposed to know how, but you have a great responsibility to learn how. And that's what we're offering and teaching, a space to do that. And, we'll prompt people to say that this is the message I want to tell people and why people are like, oh my gosh, this happened again with this team member or within the team. Is whether you're nurturing it, taking care of it, or know how to build a culture in your workplace, clinic, business, practice, one is forming. One is forming and living. Whether
it's there whether you want it or not. It's there whether you want it or not.
Yeah. Whether you're actively doing something toward it or not, it's happening. So I find it interesting that all us high achieving, over functioning perfectionists, I'll do it myself if I want it done right, roll the sleeves up, yes, I'm overwhelmed doing it, but I see no other choice. Then you come along and you hear, well, other people have these great staffs. I just want to break a myth here, Alex, because you and I have always had this rapport of truth.
Yeah.
That is not true. That is 100% not true. And how do I know? Because I've personally worked with close to 450 clinics. And I don't mean like we had a call or two. I mean like they stayed with me as a client for 4 to 7 years on average, or they've been in a long-term program. So I am telling you that that's not true. Most people have a love-hate relationship with their team. Most people, when they say, well, this person isn't working out, I'd love to hire a new person. If they don't do the work, they are unconsciously 100% at risk of rehiring the same kind of person. And honestly, it is not a giant 3-month project to figure out why you're doing that. It is usually one conversation that sparks an awareness, some of which I've seen happen here. Yeah. And that awareness becomes a reminder, like a Post-it note that says, oh, watch out for my important value of belonging. Because if I'm not aware, I have a tendency to interact or set up structures and processes that overcompensate for that. So whenever someone says, this is what's important to me, or if you say that to yourself, ask yourself how it's two-sided coin. That's wonderful and sounds good, belonging. Flip the coin to the other side
Yeah.
and say, how might it be getting in the way? How might I be overcompensating? And
Yeah.
how as a leader may I have contributed to that bad staff person? So one of the number one sentiments I hear, Alex, is if I have to tell my staff one more time to do that thing, I'm going to have to like poke my eye out. They're like, Lily, I have told them 18 times this week. And I'm going out of my mind because we all like efficiency and it feels inefficient. So I just have a really quick prompting question again, because we're known for our tools that you can use on your own is if you're making request of a team member, ask yourself, am I making an unreasonable request or am I asking the wrong person? And I can tell you that it's often the latter. I'm really privileged that sometimes people will say, Ildi, is that reasonable? Is it reasonable that I ask my staff to set up for a clinic event? Is it reasonable that I am asking my clients to follow up with our patients? Like you do need, very much to your point, somebody who you trust in a private space to reflect with and say, ask those questions. Or is it the wrong person? And wrong person has a huge meaning. But essentially, the falling to our knees, Alex, is the feeling that you are being held hostage by that team member, that you're not in choice, that you are disempowered to run your business and all the hard work you poured into it may slow down because this person who you call a team member or a staff person is creating issues that are blocking or in the way. They're impacting the rest of your culture. So I had a client who invested in an expensive device. Which device isn't expensive, right? And everything was going along for about 6 or 7 months. And then one of the team members had a family member or friend who had a negative experience with that device. That lovely person came to work the next day and told the team the story of here's what happened to my neighbor or my cousin. And literally they had poured spending on the device, spending into what they thought was good marketing, all the rest of it. And things were going in a nice trajectory. Overnight, this thing dropped.
Jeez.
And that is not a new story. That's hugely common. Or, you're all doing risky things. So adverse effects happen. You get shaken. I had a client yesterday who said, Ildi, I said, tell me what's new since we last talked. And she said, I have had the most crazy run of difficult patients who think that they can say anything to me they want by text. And she's been injecting for 20 years. And it shook her. She said, not only is my confidence shaken, I hate my business right now.
Wow.
And I feel like burned out. I think the energy's coming through when I'm going in to do a patient consult. I feel like I'm going through the motions. And so she was reaching for the pull cord over here. But this is what I hear all the time. And the dynamic, Alex, is the difference between growth and scale. So growth is 2 + 2 + 2, and scale is 2 × 2 × 2. And we're extremely impatient as humans. This is myself included. I'm like so impatient. It's crazy. I want it like now.
I think we're getting, as time goes by, we're getting more and more impatient with Amazon Prime, with everything that's so quick these days, with the access to our phones and information so quickly that we want things now. We want things yesterday sometimes.
Yeah. Halloween things are out in July and August.
Yeah.
Christmas things are coming next in 48 hours.
Faster and faster. Who knows?
Absolutely. I agree with you. And so they're super impatient. Yeah, so they want things now. And that's the thing. It takes time while you can get into that situation very quickly, it takes time to get out of it. And this is where I sometimes feel very jaded in our field after 2 decades. But the thing that I do see as a shining beacon of light is I think more and more people like you are bringing a different approach to this field, which I'm not going to name because as soon as I say the word medical, it ruins everything. It ruins everything, that language, that belief.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to that in a sec. But I think that, more and more people like you are coming forward and, you're doing an injectable course. You're supporting people and learning how to be good, solid injectors. And what warms my heart and gives me some faith is your approach to life and therefore business is more open to say, look, things are going to happen. You're not alone. Here's what to do technically. And here's some other things to watch for. I would make it mandatory. I'm like inviting people with injectors course to just call me, text me, DM me and say, what do I need to add in this course for a message? Well, first of all, test out, is it really you? Are you a person who is giving a very all or none right or wrong way of doing things? Or are you leaving space for that person to articulate how they're going to use what you just taught them? But then there's this other space to support the human. And I call that space business. Other people call it psychology. Other people call it mindset. That to me is business. It's 90% of the business game. Can you sustain this, whether it's growth, scale, or both? Because not all aspects of your business grow at the same rate or even scale at the same rate. And that's okay. But can they sustain it? And I don't know, like get home for dinner on time or feel like they have space or energy to start a new relationship in their life or do the things they want to do. So sadly, when you go, wow, like how after 16 years or 10 years does someone not have it? I don't know. Don't you remember yesterday when you were like 10 or 11? I don't know where it goes.
Yeah.
All I know is we need to integrate messaging that says it's okay to talk about these things. In fact, it's necessary so that when it happens, not if it happens, you have somewhere to go where you don't need to be a performative doctor.
Yeah.
And a performative adult.
Yeah.
And see what happens. So I don't actually think people in medical aesthetics are in the medical aesthetics business. I think you're all in the service industry. And it's always the lens I've brought because my background was with luxury hotels and customer service training. So my business case is all that matters is how you serve people. And in a field that has completely gone misaligned, labeling best, labeling top, labeling master, labeling, which PS, like I don't even know if we're supposed to use that word anymore other than in a university degree. But I worked with a lot of dentists, optometrists, and I never met a master optometrist.
Exactly.
And it's controversial.
Yeah.
But my challenge is if somebody calls themselves that or positions something like that, I love it. I love the confidence and so on. My challenge is I'm working with a lot of people for whom that title and those concepts only increases and secures imposter syndrome. And when you're somewhere where you don't feel like you belong, or like wait till they find out I'm a fraud, or wait till they find out like my mistakes and see who I really am, so I have to put up this front, which the medical industry has tons of that to offer, it becomes problematic. So one tiny decision at a time about staff, your clinic culture, how you're going to run your business starts to become misaligned. I don't know anything about archery, but here's what I know is the most interesting thing is if you look at the science of how that arrow travels, which is one like miraculously controlled by a human who pulls that bow. If you actually Google it and look up the science, which I did way back when, it's amazing how a tiny misalignment at the beginning can cause this thing to go off track. For the best doctor, most competent individual, most, in my opinion, wonderful individual finds themselves waking up 10 years later, 16 years later to go, how did I get here? Which is such a normal question.
Yeah.
And then the other question that follows, not to spoil the ending, is interestingly, how am I allowed here? How did they allow me to do this? How am I allowed? Because if they knew who I really was and what I really did and where I really came from and what all that meant, so great. And, for people listening to this go, wow, that's psychology. That's business. is not only do you have a responsibility to do that yourself, or if you want to see your business like hugely shift and life, but you also have a responsibility to learn it for yourself first, and then so you can nurture it in your team.
Yeah.
So the point is to say, wow, like you do when you go to your conferences or travel or talk to colleagues, is say, I was doing this podcast with this person today, or I came back from this thing, and here's the thing I noticed. And what you're doing is reflecting it against to where we are at your clinic today.
Yeah.
And it's those kinds of discussions, mindsets, and practices that we need to bring in. I think that's vastly missing from our field, but it is the difference maker. But it's not what we see on Instagram. What we see on Instagram is team and retention and staff is frequently rewarded, dinners, parties, reward through travel. Even our learning opportunities, Alex, they've become minimized because they're so easily accessible to anyone. So a lot of my clients very quickly go through a process where they realize that they're either manipulating or they're buying their staff's effort or work outside of payroll.
Yeah, I can see
and
that.
It's an interesting thing to explore, because I've always had this like, let's meet in a place of honesty. I've done it, and just because I learned it once didn't mean that I didn't repeat that mistake. But I've done it where I worked with a really talented person, a rare person who's very good, like very, very good at many, many things, right? And one day this person says, hey, I think I want to reduce my hours. I think I want to try for a family. And I'm like, what's going to happen to me and my business if this person leaves? And what we try and do is we minimize that falling to our knees and saying, what do we do? By having a strong culture in place, we can articulate and really good systems and processes that are simple. And I can't stress that enough. Like a process can be 2 steps and it's fine. So what's really interesting too, because you asked at the beginning, what's different this year, is a lot of my clients really, and I think our field, resonate with the message that, yes, we know we're supposed to have systems and processes in place, but all or none thinking always kills us. I have no processes or systems in place, and they all need to be in place. Wrong. I can give you story after story, case study, example after example, to tell you that, success and momentum begets success and momentum. So if you change 2 systems, like even starting one at a time, but I say to Alex, because they're often related, it's like batch cooking. It's awesome, right? If you're going to boil potatoes, then what else can you do? You can have mashed potatoes for dinner, and you can make topping for shepherd's pie or vegetarian shepherd's pie. So what is so great about all of you is you get that right away. So if you pick 2 systems that you think would really make a difference, that feels actually doable, that's it. See what happens. Let them run for a month, which is only 22 working days, and see what happens. What happens in real life, if you want to know how it turns out, is people become very addicted to the process. They're like, we've done the 2, now what 2 is next? And I do the torturous exercise of making them wait and do a debrief with their entire team, because those systems impact your team members.
Love that.
And I think they have a ton of input to give us, but we don't access the input. But when I ask your team, with you out of the room, tell me what 2 systems, we literally, like, every client knows I love Post-it notes. They send me them in different colors, different designs from all over the world. It's great. Write on 2 Post-it notes, 2, I call them processes. We define the difference between system and process, but write down 2 that you think would really make a difference for the clinic or for you. And nobody has to think very long. They just write down the 2. It's really interesting to see what your team has in common for what they think could really benefit from changing right now. That would actually be the easiest. And then we have some success, and we continue to build on that success. But the people who say, okay, we're going to like transform our lives and we're going to dedicate everything to doing these systems, it's kind of like marketing. It becomes massively overwhelming, and then we abandon it. or we
I,
find
I
and make a
I
reason for it
love
not
that
to do it.
strategy. I absolutely love that strategy of keeping things simple, because not only
Yeah,
does it make things relatively easy for your team members, but it also makes it easy for you as well, and makes
exactly.
it so that you can actually apply the process in a more effective manner as well. I kind of give the analogy of, let's say, for example, things are too complicated or there's too much to know or too much to do. It's kind of like looking at a menu that has three, four, 5 pages and looking at a menu that just has one. Well, a lot
Yes.
easier, a lot more simple, right? That's the only choice that you have essentially. The other thing that I find interesting in that answer of yours was how you sort of make small changes, but you sort of track them and then reassess later on. Kind of
Good point.
as what we do in medicine as well. You know, if there's an issue regarding your kidneys, well, you have to track the kidney issue and then follow up a couple of months later to make sure the kidneys are still in good health, or whatever other system is in good health. But
Yeah,
you're tracking that one specific thing in that one area, which I love actually.
for sure.
Another thing that you've mentioned that I think that no other coach has really mentioned was, and I did this a lot over the last year, and I'll be very honest with you, was that owning a business is like constantly having a, well, especially for me, and I have a pretty strong auto critique myself, and I try and assess myself if that decision that I made that day was the right decision, and I always try and see it in a more objective manner. And I don't necessarily think that I'm always right in most situations. I just try and see it as a third party and objectify it as much as possible. But it's sort of like running a business is looking at yourself in the mirror every single day. And that's probably the hardest part of it, is you have to face the reality that when things go wrong, it's that mirror in front of you that always is looking back at you, because at the end of the day, it's your business, it's your little baby that you're trying to
Yes.
nurture and you're trying to grow. So as, and maybe there's an analogy with parenting there. I'm not a parent myself, but you might have more experience than me on that. But that's the hardest part, is not only realizing that a lot of the things that you do are affecting your team, and the way that you show up to work, the way that you talk to your staff members, every single thing. And that's why you mentioned the staff culture gets built regardless of you wanting it to get built or not, is that something's happening regardless of it. So it's your job to sort of direct that culture into that way that you sort of direct it, so that you're not only you're happy and sort of aligned with your value as a person, but also your team members also see that it's part of your values. And I think it's important to mention to your other team members that these are values and processes that you put into your clinic, but it's also based on your value at the same time. Or that's at least something that I learned today from you today, Ildi. So I absolutely love that. Thank you very much.
Those are incredible insights, Alex. And you're not telling your team, you're actually showing them. You're
Mhm.
doing it through the most powerful thing, which business owners and parents know, which is people don't follow what they're told, they follow what they see.
Yep. Yep.
So if
Yep.
they see and hear you speaking a certain way and acting a certain way, and it's not only what you do, it's also what you don't do.
Hmm.
So there's another question I have asked thousands of people in our industry, their team member, staff. How many of you receive enough feedback?
Hmm. Exactly.
Um, Crickets.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is around your analogy of the mirror, that's what self-awareness is, the reflection, right?
Yeah.
Noticing, monitoring, regulating how you think, act, and feel
Mm.
is they will say, I don't get enough feedback. The interesting part is the quality of the feedback that you as a business owner are able to give is only as good as the quality that you receive.
Yeah.
So I have asked thousands of doctors over 23 years, specifically in our field, do you get enough feedback in your role? And they're like, no. Is there a negative score I could select? No, I got it in when I was coming up in medicine. Everybody was, peer review
Yep.
to critiquing to all the unhealthy, toxic behaviors.
Mm.
But then it stopped.
Yeah.
And so picture this, our team members are coming to work every day. And what indication do they have that they're doing well or even doing what they're expected and how that might be rewarded or why
Yeah.
it
I learned
matters?
that. I learned that. Yeah. I
Right?
really, really
So
learned that.
the other fine line, because you're so brave to say, hey, like I look in the mirror, like it's very insightful. So you're on the right track. And we have to be careful of the two-sided coin where it's not necessarily your fault. However, it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
So a team member who's been told 18 times and they're still not following it, or they have a lot of avoidant behaviors, or something isn't going right, a process, whatever. We have to be very, very careful not to self-blame, which is a learned skill. Because if you were raised in a good blaming household like I was,
Absolutely.
where criticism was given as a form of love, as a form of attention, it was almost a compliment. Like, it was just part of what we all did, and what I saw my parents do, and extended family and people in our Hungarian culture do, good European culture. That's what I knew. So until you learn something else, you don't actually stop a behavior, you just replace one behavior with another. So if we're self-blaming, we want to just be mindful of that tendency, so that we make sure that unconsciously, because it 100% will, doesn't leak out in our language and actions towards our staff.
That's a great advice. That's amazing advice, because if you start self-blaming yourself too much, that's not only going to affect you as a business owner, but it's going to affect your vocabulary and your way that it affects your culture at some point.
Huge. And you may find you have like the most awesome team and they're like, oh, that doesn't happen here, Ildi. They're always giving each other compliments. Really? I'd like to hear some of them. And a lot of them are really passive aggressive. Like, Ashley, like, she tries her best, but she's just never been very good at it. You know how she is. And like, please don't say anything.
Yeah.
You know what we used to call that we used to call that gossip.
Yeah.
And now it's some fake artificial harmony, which is a real term when we talk about dysfunctions of a team, artificial harmony. And it is a big skill and exercise to learn how to have more authentic harmony, which I'm only the messenger. Don't shoot me. That means including conflict. That means accepting and finding a place for conflict. And what I've always loved about your approach and the snippets you sent me earlier to get ready for today is you have a real focus and understanding of how you as a person is showing up in your business, is informing your team culture and your patient outcomes, your patient satisfaction.
You taught me that, to be honest with you, from your speech there, because
I'm grateful you shared that.
It might sound like the most unuseful advice, but I thought it was probably the most useful. Was that your attitude the moment you wake up in the morning kind of almost sets the tone when you show up to work that day as well. If you show up that day and you're like, you know what, we just had a poor week, we looked at our numbers, the numbers aren't looking great, one of your team members is sick, for example, they're not showing up to work, you're having some issues on inventory, and you're already showing up in a bad mood. That was probably one of those things that I learned, was that when things go very bad, and it might not be your control, it is your responsibility, but not necessarily your fault that it happened.
Exactly.
You still need to show up. You have to show face, and you have to show that you're still trying your best to make this clinic run in a positive manner, despite all of the other things that went awry that week.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's positive. I'm going to say functional, and you get to decide what functional is, and you get to, whether you know it or not, you are and get to articulate it to your team, invite people with whom that resonates. And when we say that language, that mindset, like all of this, I'm talking, this goes into how your consent forms are worded, how your phone is answered, how all of your marketing messaging, and literally the words that you use. And what's so interesting is, I always found this really magical about culture, is if you're a clinic and you have practiced, which is what we're doing today, right? We're practicing articulating some of our values, some of our beliefs, some how-tos, and start to implement them. Even if you're talking to someone external to your clinic, like your marketing company, you will literally show up using different words, articulating different values, different processes that will then inform that person of who you are. And that's what leads to a message that sounds, looks, and feels different than every other clinic down the street and on the corner.
And
And
it also creates this thing called, and I think that's one of the most important thing in medical aesthetics as well, but because it's part of business, but the
yeah,
brand. The brand. When somebody was telling me that, I think I sat down with somebody, or that I saw a video, but they were telling me, Alex, you need to brand yourself. You need to have you as a brand, in 2024, because that brand or that business, or it's essentially it's you.
yeah,
It's another image of yourself. So if that brand is aligned with a lot of your values, and not
yes,
only is and that's why when I sat down with my designer to design the
mhm,
logo, I didn't understand the importance of branding and how important the logo necessarily meant to me, but it was actually quite important. I
yeah.
would probably be staying up at night, not being able to sleep just because there's one thing off on the logo. Something very simple. So maybe I'm a little bit OCD. Maybe it's that ADHD part of me, but I felt that it had to be aligned in your beliefs and your ethos and who you are as a person. And that's why when you had that sort of presentation, I was like, wow, every single decision of that business, of that operations,
Yeah.
comes from quite a lot of, whether it's good baggage, bad baggage, but it comes from a certain type of baggage, your upbringing, your everything. So there's all of this part in the back that
Yes.
is affecting a little bit more things in the future. And I didn't realize that until I actually met you. So
That's
that
a
was
great
probably,
insight.
yeah,
It's a great insight.
absolutely.
And Alex, you know what the interesting thing is? People like yourself, possibly even me too, we think, okay, got it. I'll outwork it. I'll out educate it. I'll out spend it. I'll out
But
invest
that's
it.
because I feel as if that's we're hard workers. That's why we're just
Yeah.
hard workers.
But I'm telling you, you cannot. You
Yeah.
you literally cannot. But that really, because you've asked such a good question. How did that person get to 10 years or 16 years? Didn't they quote figure it out? No, that's all or none thinking. They figured some things out. And
Mm,
there's other things that by their own choice, they
ab-
left unexplored. They didn't have the space, they didn't have the permission, they didn't have the support, they didn't have a place to go.
yeah.
And so in all the education that's happening in our field, this is why I'm advocating and pleading with clinic owners and founders to say, balance out your business development more. We do a ton of product knowledge training. That's fine. I can show you after 23 years what happens when you do product knowledge training and you launch a device or service. Product knowledge plus an event, product knowledge plus whatever. I can show you that formula over and over again. When we do product knowledge plus what we call core development,
Mm,
it could be sales training, it could be consultation training, it could be time management, it could be self-awareness training. When we do something, it needs to be relevant to what we're doing. When you do PK, product knowledge plus core skills, then introduce a device, then introduce a an event, a concept that equals the highest revenue. The first model, PK plus device, event, whatever, equals some money.
yeah.
But the second, with that triple formula, equals the highest revenue.
Mm,
So there's a huge epidemic, Alex. Like I have never seen such low profitability in our industry as as now. So revenue's great, but what we put in the bank, the profit, all-time low. It's really, really scary. And I understand and always have why people want to turn away from that to go, oh, I don't want to know what that number is. Right.
mm,
And but the point is, can you release judgment to understand that the average med spa is making like 6 to 15 cents on the dollar?
mm.
That's
Wow.
and so let's not judge it as right or wrong because we want to shake our heads like we're in school and go, 15 out of 100 is not good. 15 cents out of $1 is not good. Is if we can, okay, go ahead and judge it,
Mm,
judgment complete. Now go to a space where you're me and you're not judging it and saying, what would you like it to be? Now, my clients know that they need to ask a question back. Where can I expect it to be? So we look at, I'm talking like in 10 minutes, not a big exercise. How many people do you have? What's the size of your clinic? How long you've been in practice? And now I can tell you, being at like 20, 25 cents on the dollar is really great. The highest I've ever seen is 42 cents on the dollar in one clinic in 23 years. And
wow.
everybody else has been different. So, but what I can tell you is when it comes to scaling, just like investing or, interest accumulating or calories accumulating, whatever you're measuring, those tiny little differences make a huge deal. That's why someone stops drinking soda or pop and they lose 17 pounds and they're still eating burgers and fries.
Absolutely.
So it's the small things in the business. And I think that we're so looking at the giant scope of business, the giant scope of leadership, that we're missing the absolute most efficient, effective, productive, important tool, which is us and what we bring to the business. And treat that like a business exercise
Yeah.
where you balance out PK training with core training. And I'll give you an example. If you do 0 core training now, commit to doing 3 per year. Not sure what topics, DM me. It's honestly like available on the internet for free. And I would love, if I could, to make one suggestion to your listeners, which is TED Talks. They're short. They're 11 minutes. Some are like, these people are amazing.
They're
Some
amazing.
people have it down to 8 minutes, 11 minutes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones is 18 minutes. Don't tell me that you don't. We're so busy and important in this clinic. We don't have 18 minutes to play a TED Talk for our team and then take 18 minutes to discuss it.
Yeah.
And just sit through the awkwardness and say, look, I watched this, it inspired me. And there is going to be a lightning bolt from the medical aesthetic gods that comes down if you try and take that TED Talk and turn it into something related to our industry device. Don't make it about that. Leave space for humans, for their thoughts, for their expression, for their to turn on that analytical, critical thinking part of their mind where they're allowed to say an opinion for which they don't feel like they're going to get outcast or not included. And that takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of practice. But TED Talks are available to everyone. They're free on YouTube. If anybody would like a list of the ones that I would send to any clinic to use, they can DM me and I'll send it to them because it's made for clinics.
Yeah.
And you pick and choose.
Yeah. Wow.
But you can get started.
That's amazing advice. It's not only the listening to the TED Talk, but debriefing it after.
Yeah.
It's
You know what, Alex?
It's very similar to what we did in medicine. We always did that. There's a case, there's an issue, let's debrief, takes 15 minutes after, but that's how you retain that knowledge for quite a long time.
And you know why I love the TED Talks is because it's research-based. These are people who have done studies, research. Yes, some people have anecdotal experiences, but we need to make that count as well because we're dealing with patients that think this side of my lip is here and that's there, and you did this to me, or please can you fix it? You're dealing with things that may or may not be there, that may or may not be true. So my quick story of the last 23 years is early when I started in 2003, I judged a clinic on how it looked. Honestly, like I'd worked in luxury hotels, so I identified with objects of beauty and design and so on. So I'm like, wow, this is a beautiful clinic. They must be doing well. Then I discovered very quickly that has nothing to do with it. It's revenue. The success of the clinic is based on revenue. That didn't last 2 years. Then I went to profitability. It's not how much money we make in revenue, it's how much money we keep. So then I evaluated a clinic's success on profitability. And then in 2012, through doing some work of my own and really then having almost a solid 10 years behind me, like it only took a 9-year overnight success to develop a new core belief based on a solid observation. And I've stayed there forever and still there. And this is what it is, that I now evaluate a clinic's success, which also means profitability and revenue, staff retention, patient retention. We have to do a whole other thing on patient retention, by the team's ability to give and receive feedback, period.
Wow.
That's it. And every person who I've said that to, Alex, they resonate. Yeah. The really smart people say, I love that. Show me how to get there. And if you're willing to, like 3 times a year, sit down and say, let's do, pizza and TED Talk, or let's just do TED Talks and so on, you're giving people a safe, interesting, and useful exercise in 40 minutes, right? 18 minutes or 20 minutes for the TED Talk and 20 minutes to discuss, of practicing. And if you say, Ildi, what are the benefits? It will hugely impact their confidence, their contribution to the team, and ultimately their contribution to your business.
Love that.
Because 100% of the time you will walk into a room if you have a team member before you and say, oh yeah, Leslie told me that you all watched a TED talk about XYZ. Your team will talk about it even with patience, but it will flow through, expand their vocabulary, expand their thinking,
Yes.
make them feel like they're doing something where that's where you and I, Alex, we need to do the difficult discipline of giving them space and speaking last.
Yeah, exactly.
And practicing at it.
And it's not always easy because we want to be the ones that talk a lot. We have that a lot of business owners want to be the one that's sort of talking a lot. But I think if you're doing culture correctly, you should allow the space for your employees and your team members to also have that creative space, because every individual has creativity. So I do want my team members to also express that creativity. And I think team members are only going to express that creativity when they feel that they're comfortable in that team.
For sure.
And in that space.
And
they're
trust.
not going to be creative if they're constantly being told what to do.
Right. And that creativity requires an environment of trust to speak up and say, or to even wear something different or behave differently. That takes some security and trust and safety. Yeah. And don't ask me how to create safety. I have some concepts, but that is a big, massive, important thing to do. So when you see podcasts and, they've been in our industry and they've been viewed thousands or some even hundreds of thousands of times, and some guys on there saying, yeah, really the secret to our success is our team. He is talking about some of the stepping stones they've done, but what I wish is that they would talk more about the nuance of nobody put a team together by hiring people, Alex, or having people hired for them who just got along naturally, who just like each other naturally, who understand how to communicate naturally. So what they're not asked is, tell me about your team dynamics. And they may say things like, well, we have no room here for gossip or conflict. Ask any communication expert how that works. That's called my family. We will not talk about anything wrong ever. We'll be critical as all get out, but we won't. No. So, those are kind of the flags where you go, wow, I'm really curious about, there's literally no such thing. So we have to be willing to ask more questions about the content that we're viewing, even the models, mentors, coaches. That's the thing. If you're asking one mentor, they know the way they did it and maybe a little bit about how others did it. I think that's the advantage sometimes that we have, is my job is to lay out all 7 cards or 4 cards, all options, and say, I'm going to tell you the briefest abstract of all these 7 or 4 scenarios, and you decide what you're going to take and leave. But what I love is you're all so smart. By the time I'm on number 2 and number 3, you've already decided what you love, what you hate, what you will be doing, what you will definitely not be doing. And you've created, to your point of creativity, this hybrid of how you want to take this information and articulate it in your clinic. And that's called doing business. And if you can keep at it, it will succeed.
Wow.
And Alex, I wanted to tell you something really quickly for the, you're being advised, build a brand. You are the brand. Yes. And if you come over here for a week and work with me with our clinics who are 15, 20 years plus, who are ready to sell, a third of them are now taking the next 24 to 36 months with us to increase the profitability of the clinic because they're ready to sell. But they are now undoing the personal brand because they will be removed, or the brand and the person related to that brand, because they're selling.
Yes.
A third of them.
Yeah.
The rest already had whatever. And you don't have to choose one or the other. You can get to choose both. And why I bring this up as an example is I hope that what you and I are contributing, like through our time, is a space where people understand there's more than one way. There is no one right way. There's the right way for you right now.
Yeah.
In this, what we like to call season. So I would be really interested to see and keep following you around which season gets what and how it's articulated, how it shows up.
Well, I will say this, LD. Your way of explaining concepts to not only business owners but other individuals, and the way of how you thought about how business coaching and business development would be is actually quite not only unique, but I think quite efficient as well. Because
Thank you.
if you target the main issue or the main problem, which a lot of the sources sometimes it's actually us, a lot of the other problems can get solved from that top down sort of approach. I
Thank
absolutely
you.
loved your advices that you gave us today. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. I learned so much with you already, and I'll probably continue to learn quite a bit more. What I'm going to do is because I'm actually have a I have to go see my team later on, and we actually have a team. I do this sort of things where we have like these monthly team building events, and
Nice.
I'm actually going to start implementing these TED talks, and we'll see where we're gonna get there from there. I think that was such a lovely idea, and I think other business owners who will have the opportunity to listen onto this episode in this podcast, they'll probably learn quite a lot about how to run their business, and not necessarily from going through topics on your numbers, how to do marketing, how to set up your website. It's not even about that. It's about you as an individual first, and essentially how your upbringing and values affect the decision making and what you need to do as a business owner in order for your business to thrive, but also for you to have a good quality of life for the next
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years. Because it doesn't a lot of us as business owners, we love our business, don't get me wrong. It's a part of us, as I was saying, but that doesn't mean that we have to be 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours, 90 hours a week necessarily devoted to that. We have a family life, we have a personal life. And if we don't want to go in towards the burnout and we want to maintain and stay in this lovely business for as long as possible, I think having some longevity on how your systems are put into place, having some time to put into breaks as well,
Yes.
those are all very important things that owners need to learn. I learned it sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way. I've had a couple of mentors. So, you sort of gave the example of having these 7 cards placed in front of you. The more mentors you have, the more cards you get placed in front of you. But at the same time, you also
Absolutely.
have to have quite a bit of analytics to say, well, you have 7 cards, 10 cards, 17
Yeah.
cards, or 20 cards. What out of those 17 or 20 cards do you think is going to work for you, actually? So that's why I love going to these conferences. I love going to meet new people. And that's not only because I love going out and having free food and free drinks, to be honest with you, but
Yeah.
it's more connecting with other individuals. That's the part that
Yeah.
I love the most about the conferences. I mean, it's great, all of the information that I learn, but connecting with other business owners, connecting with other like-minded people is probably one of the most rewarding things
For
in our
sure.
field. And there's a lot of extremely talented people in our field, highly functional, fully ADHD, fully OCD'd as well, but
Yeah.
that are running on caffeine and a bunch of other substances probably. And that's what I love about this field. At the same time,
That is so awesome.
yeah, there's a dark side to medical aesthetics. There's going to be another episode on that coming as well. We touched on a
Cool.
lot of different even topics that I would love to talk on. It'll be great, Ildi, at some point, maybe next year, to have you again on the podcast and to
Would
see
love it.
the growth as well. But thank you so much, Ildi. Before I let you go, though, what are the next sort of big moves, big plans for you in 2024 and 2025? Are you going to be doing any new presentations? What's next for you?
I am. I've actually opened up my schedule to do more clinic training. So you're training for your team and staff. So that's been closed for quite a bit. So if you'd like me at your clinic,
Yeah,
invite me. You can DM me. I'm here.
lovely.
Our big event that's happening happens every year, which is at the beginning of December. We launch our program called Clinic Transformations, and it's a hybrid business and leadership program
Yeah.
that goes for 8 months.
Yeah.
And its entire purpose is to help you become a profitable in-demand clinic with a positive everyone sells culture to keep that team and clinic growing. And It's interesting what you mentioned about, your desire and need and how much you love connecting with colleagues and getting real value from them at conferences, dinners, etc. I
Mhm.
think ultimately, while we developed that program for a lot of reasons around just helping people understand the leadership and business components of how to run a practice, systems, etc. I think ultimately I did it to try and solve the problem of isolation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
this It's a massive, massive problem, and I think it's very, very closely related to burnout.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
how do you get peer opinions without being in an echo chamber? How do you you're these natural problem solvers. I think what we're teaching is those problem solving skills, because you all like to do it. You're super creative, you know what's needed, and it's so nice to feel supported. So that starts every beginning of December. We take 25 people and then that's it. So we're here. And Alex, I've loved hearing your views. It's after this many years in the industry, sometimes I get jaded, and I really love your tone and initiative and your thinking about this field and approach to business leadership in life.
I think it's so
So,
important. That's why I think it's core. I think it's core. It,
yeah,
it sets the tone correctly on if you, because the end goal at the end of the day is if you really love the field of medical aesthetics and you really want your patients to not only improve their appearance, but also feel better and to try and conquer the world, the only way that you're able to do that is through training, through business development, through creating connections with others, and also figuring out you as a person and an individual. Trying being the best version of yourself is going to improve the outcomes of your patients. That's something that's very, very interesting, and I
for
found
sure. And
so
as you move along, you may find that you're going to drop the word best to become your best self, to becoming more of yourself.
exactly,
And
exactly.
that's a big mystery. That takes some time. Now you understand why the 10 years. Like, how could this take so long?
Yeah.
But that's maybe where wisdom comes from in that experience, which can happen at different life stages. But
Mhm.
I hope we get to see each other soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you know me, if there's a conference and I'm invited, I will be there. You know that, Ildi. So thank you so much for your time. You guys can find Ildi online. We'll put all the information on our YouTube channels, on our Facebook channels, on our Instagram channels, and on our TikTok channels. Ildi, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope we do get a chance to do this sometime soon. I know we will actually, and I will actually start implementing a couple of tips that I learned today. And I really hope that you have a great rest of your summer.
Thanks, Alex. And let me know how it goes. I'm so interested to hear about how it all goes for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll catch you guys all next time. Take care, and we'll stop the recording in 3, 2, 1.